Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Turkey has always supported Azerbaijan, that is often considered Ankara's closest ally in the South Caucasus, against Armenia. What is different now is that Turkey is for the first time providing military support to Azerbaijan, which together with the high-tech weapons the Azeris secured from Israelis has helped change the balance of power on the battlefield. With Turkish military support and with Israeli weapons, the Azeris are now pushing back against Armenia and taking back some of their occupied territory from the Armenians. Turkey's broader interest in the region, I think, is to support the Azeris, to help them recover their occupied territories, and that if one day there is a political settlement, the Azeris enter the negotiating table from a position of strength. So Turkey's President Erdogan delivered quite phenomenal economic growth until recently and built a base of adoring supporters who like him and his conservative message, but also because he has delivered many of these supporters out of poverty. Not the case anymore. Turkey entered into recession in 2018. It exited recession last year. It re-entered recession this year because of COVID. And so Erdogan's base is imploding. I think that Erdogan is therefore directing public attention away from domestic issues of governance and economy at home to foreign policy issues, where it is easier for him to build a national security constituency than using his message of governance and economy where he's failing at home. Of course, to be fair to Erdogan, he's not creating these conflicts, whether it's Libya or Syria, Nagorno-Karabakh, there are existing conflicts, but he's finding a segue for him to enter these conflicts. And I think that has so far worked. Turkey has pushed back against forces of General Haftar in Libya through a well-executed drone campaign. And now we're seeing a repeat of that in South Caucasus. Again, Turkey is providing drones to the Azeris, who are therefore making headways against Armenian forces. I get this question a lot. People say, is Turkey like Russia? Is Erdogan like Putin? I tell them Turkey is not like Russia, meaning if you take into account country's record of democracy, a democratic record. Turkey has been a democracy since 1950. What happened recently in Turkey, Erdogan losing elections for Istanbul, Ankara, other key cities to opposition mayors, could never happen under Putin's rule in Russia. So I think in this regard, Turkey is not like Russia. Perhaps you could say it's like Poland and Hungary, other democracies who have fallen under autocratic leaders. But while Turkey is not Russia, Erdogan and Putin like each other. I actually think they have a political man crush on each other. They like each other's style of governance. And I think Putin's smart approach to Turkey in the aftermath of the failed coup attempt against Erdogan in 2016 only cemented that relationship. That coup was a nefarious plot. Erdogan barely escaped for his life. The coup plotters bombed the country's capital and the national parliament. While it took Turkey's allies in NATO, including the US, days to reach out to Erdogan, guess who was the first foreign leader to call Erdogan? It was Vladimir Putin. I think Putin did not commit what I call, has not committed rather what I call reductio ad Erdoganum, which basically means don't boil your Turkey policy down to your passions for Erdogan. So while Turkey's Western allies were sitting on their hands after the failed coup attempt against Erdogan, Putin reached out to him. That was very significant. Russia is Turkey's historic nemesis. Turks and Russians have fought many wars, all instigated by the Russians and all overall lost by the Turks. In Syria, when Turkey started to support the rebels there in 2012, it looked as if because the Assad regime that the rebels opposed is backed by the Russians, it looked like the 18th war was going to start, and you did not need a crystal ball to figure out who was going to win. But the coup changed Vladimir Putin's calculus. He dropped Syria, he dropped his aggressive act against Turkey, he called Erdogan, wished him well after the coup, and guess to where Erdogan's first visit was after the coup. It wasn't to a NATO summit in Brussels, it wasn't to Washington, to his closest allies' capital, or to London, Paris, Berlin, to the capital cities of Turkey's European allies. It was a visit to Russia. Vladimir Putin invited him. Where did Putin host Erdogan? Not in Moscow, but in Russia's imperial capital, St. Petersburg. Remember, the Russians and Ottomans have a long tradition of wars instigated by imperial Russia. And where did Putin host Erdogan? at the Konstantinovsky Palace built by Catherine the Great. So Putin's message to Erdogan was, my ancestor, Catherine the Great, started a tradition of bullying you Turks. I, Putin the Great, will end this. I think that was the beginning of a new relationship between Erdogan and Putin. It's not that the countries are allies. It's that the two leaders now have entered into power-sharing agreements in Syria, in Libya, and perhaps now also in the South Caucasus. I would not be surprised if Russia brokers a peace deal in Nagorno-Karabakh. For the time being, I think Putin is happy to sit on his hands in the South Caucasus. Number one, the Armenia's leader in Yerevan, Pashinyan, is the least pro-Russian leader in charge in Armenia in recent memory. So Putin wants to weaken Pashinyan. And a military defeat in Nagorno-Karabakh will weaken Pashinyan and might end up with his ouster. So that's 1.1 for Putin. In the South Caucasus, Armenia is Russia's closest ally, but Putin never wants to leave the Azeris out in cold. So he needs to let them recover some of their captured territory back from the Armenians. He will step in only after that. Number three, Putin wants to cultivate Erdogan. He is cultivating Erdogan in Syria. He wants to cultivate him in South Caucasus. So he wants to let Turkish ally Azerbaijan, so freedom of action, allow freedom of action to Turkish ally Azerbaijan, and then he'll step in. So I think Putin gets to win Erdogan's heart, Baku's friendship, and Pashinyan's ouster with a strategy of sitting on his hands and then stepping in at the right and opportune moment to come down with a ceasefire to end the war.